p.m. on June 8th, 2021. I am pursuing a alternative effort to address certain matters. I have put up the GAO.gov website. I'm looking at B-317636, severable services contracts, April 21st, 2009. So far, a few questions have been brought up. I'm not going to try to answer them necessarily, but I'm going to pose these questions and comments as I encounter them. First, it is addressed to the Honorable Joseph I. Lieberman and the Honorable Susan M. Collins. Joseph Lieberman being the chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs for this term, and then the Susan Collins being the ranking minority member for the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. That would apply by default that he's one party, she's the other party. But if I am not mistaken, did not Joseph Lieberman also identify himself at some point as an independent? This brings up a question. What happens if you are identified as having a party affiliation and then change your party in terms of matters related to calibration associated with what it means to be involved with something that may be a part of underwriting, including in appropriations processes, especially if there are these sorts of designations. It speaks to the concept of the permanency and then the position of the ranking versus minority member versus the individual in that position. This is something that may have a material factor in other regards, especially because there's very few people that either change their party affiliation during the course of their political career or go from having affiliation with a major party to being an independent or vice versa. But that's the first thing that comes up. Secondly, it discusses appropriations and how appropriations allowed for certain statutes to be put into effect. Does this imply then that if, for instance, in the course of an appropriations bill, there's actually a actionable item in association with that appropriation, that it becomes law that can then be cited or used later on as a justification for comparable actions? And if that's the case, is this a manner in which bills that are proposed but do not get out of committee, and hence, on one hand, by default, end up going out of consideration, end up actually being put into effect via appropriation? And then what is the necessity of tearing, or rather identifying, the legacy bill that provided the actual actionable item that ends up being appropriated? And or what relationship is there to the office of or the position of that whom the original proposal came from versus the individual who sponsored or co-sponsored the original bill? This is actually a directly materially relevant factor and concern I have at this time. That's the second one. The third one discusses how a specific appropriation is setting a kind of precedent. And this one regards the Secretary of Defense and the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security in consideration of the Coast Guard when not in service in the Navy, is how it's worded. But it appears to be discussing a kind of term related to contract engagement and performance. And so the question becomes, if there's something like this specific to a particular department or a particular line item of an appropriations process, does the specific kind of action have applicability outside of those areas of the appropriations process, i.e., if you are appropriating an action within a particular area, for instance, under one agency, and it gives sets a precedent in terms of implementation, does that have applicability for other agencies or other departments that would be under other areas of the appropriations process? And this is it brings up what was the first kind of consideration, which is insofar as this is discussing a 1 year a contract for less than 1 year that starts in one fiscal year and then goes over or has a term that goes into the next fiscal year, would this be considered a form of bridge loan or a sort of bridge, sort of carryover? We see there's specific financial.
Nothing. Nothing you did is legally binding. All it is witchcraft and sorcery by people that aren't even qualified for witchcraft and sorcery. This is 5 minutes into 27 minutes, or rather, 7 seconds short of 27 minutes. It completely eviscerates whatever you thought you were going to get away with. For this fiscal year, the last fiscal year, the year before that one, and all the way back to whatever it was you thought you were going to cover up from May of 2017 onward.